Now, there's a very common statement or phrase that I hear from athletes when I'm working with them in one-on-one coaching, which, by the way, if you are interested in learning more about one-on-one coaching, I've put a link to that in the description below. But it's this phrase that they tell me a lot when they are experiencing fear of failure. And it's, I feel like I'm playing with my foot on the brake, right? They are holding themselves back. And this stems from this idea of playing scared, playing timidly. So I want you to think about a situation in normal life, right? Normal day-to-day life, when you would be afraid of something. If you are afraid of something in real life and that fear is real, right? You really do need to be afraid of this thing. We could even go to an extreme example of you being in the wild and you being afraid of a predator, right? What would you do? Well, you would have two choices, right? You would go head to head with that predator, or you would try to avoid the predator. Now, what's probably gonna be the best option for you if it's an option in the first place? Avoiding, right? So you want to avoid, you want to hide, you want to play it safe. Now, in our minds, this fearful reaction, so thinking, I need to avoid this consequence that I don't want to have happen, it's going to be the same mental reaction as if you were in the wild, in real life, if you are really experiencing fear. Unfortunately, during a game, when you try to avoid and you're already out there on the field or on the court, you're just going to find yourself trying to hide when you play, and that's why you end up holding yourself back. You are playing with your foot on the brake because you're trying to avoid failing. You're trying to play safe. Now, playing it safe in the wild is what's going to keep you alive. Playing it safe during a game is what's going to cause you to leave the game feeling frustrated and disappointed in yourself. So a really great example of this, or a story that I want to share, comes from a soccer player that I've worked with. Now, this soccer player, he was 14, I believe, when he and I began working together. And so I talked with his parents first. And his parents were telling me all about what he was going through and what he was experiencing. And they were telling me that it was almost as if he was hiding in the corner during the game. He was shying away from 1v1s. He was kind of avoiding calling for the ball, so he wasn't calling for the ball. He didn't want it passed to him. When he had open shots to take, he was passing off open shots. So all in all, he was hiding, right? He was holding himself back. But that was during games. Now, if we looked at practices, he was a completely different player. During practices, he was getting involved. He was going for these 1v1s. He was going for tackles because he played midfield, so he was going for tackles. He was taking shots on goal. He was scoring goals. He was getting assists when they did scrimmages during practice. So what changed, right? How could that player completely vanish when it came to games? Well, it was because of his fear, right? He was experiencing fear of failure, or the fear of the consequences of what would happen during games, because all of a sudden games were more important, right? Games were where a mistake mattered. It mattered if he made a mistake during games, and so he experienced a lot more of this fear, and this fear led him to hold himself back. So during games, he avoided, he passed the ball off, he just did not want to be involved, because while he might not have succeeded during the games, right? He wasn't playing his best during these games. He also wasn't playing terribly during these games. And that's this key thing that we need to look at when it comes to this fear. You might not be making a ton of mistakes right now because you're pretty successful at avoiding those mistakes, right? But if you're out there avoiding, if you're out there playing it safe, if you're playing timidly, yes, maybe you aren't making a ton of mistakes, but are you playing up to your potential? Are you being as effective as you've shown that you can be during practices? That's why this athlete's or this soccer player's parents reached out to me, not because he was making mistakes left and right, but because they were seeing one player perform super well during practice and individual training sessions, and they were seeing a completely different version of him out there during games, a version that was just hiding. Right? So for yourself, have you ever experienced these games where you've been just holding yourself back, you've been hiding? You may not be playing terribly, but you're also not being effective out there, and you leave that game knowing, I did not give it my all that game. If that's the case, then that's a good indicator that you're experiencing this fear, which drives this feeling of playing it safe, holding yourself back, playing timidly. If you enjoyed this clip, be sure to watch the full-length video where I discuss what the fear of failure is and how it forms, how the fear of failure holds you back during games, and then 2 ways that you can work on managing your fear as an athlete. And go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already. I put out new videos each week on sports psychology and mental training.